You know, there's this thing about families. They're supposed to be your biggest cheerleaders, right? The people who have your back no matter what. Well, for me, growing up, my family was more like a highly competitive academic institution. And I was the kid who kept trying to skip class to go build something cool in the garage. And let me tell you, when you're the odd one out in a family obsessed with degrees and diplomas, you learn pretty quickly what it feels like to be the black sheep. It all started, really, the day I told them I wasn't going to college. Just saying that sentence out loud, even now, gives me a weird kind of chill, because in my family, that was akin to announcing you were joining a circus. A polite, well-to-do circus. But a circus nonetheless. Ethan, darling, you're just going through a phase, my mom would say, patting my hand with that overly gentle touch that meant she was simultaneously trying to soothe me and invalidate my existence. Every one of us, your father, your aunts, your uncles, your brilliant older sister, Clara, and your ambitious younger brother, David, we all went to college. It's simply what one does. And my dad, he was more direct. Ethan, this isn't a suggestion. This is the path. You get a degree, you get a good stable job. You build a life. What else is there? You think you're going to just tinker around with computers in your basement and make a living. He'd always say tinker around with a dismissive wave of his hand, as if my passion for technology was no more serious than collecting stamps. If you've ever felt the crushing weight of family expectations, that suffocating feeling that you're living someone else's dream, then you know exactly what I was going through. Seriously, if you've ever been the different one in your family, hit that like and subscribe button. And drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your stories about challenging family norms. Our family gatherings, instead of being joyous occasions, often felt like thinly veiled performance reviews. My older sister, Clara, a brilliant lawyer with a Harvard law degree, was the undisputed golden child. Every one of her accomplishments, from acing the LSATs to landing a prestigious internship, was dissected and celebrated with painstaking detail. My younger brother, David, was hot on her heels, already talking about applying to Ivy League schools in his freshman year of high school. They were the perfect academic specimens, the living embodiments of my parents' dreams. And then there was me, Ethan, the one who built elaborate tree houses that barely survived a strong breeze but looked amazing. The one who spent hours disassembling old electronics just to see how they worked, often putting them back together mostly successfully. The one who devoured books on entrepreneurship and coding, not Shakespeare or calculus. My black sheep status wasn't earned overnight. It was a gradual descent, starting from those early conversations about my future. While Clara and David were poring over college brochures, I was sketching out ideas for an online business, something involving custom websites and digital marketing. I saw the internet as this vast, untapped frontier, full of opportunities that didn't require a 4-year degree and crippling student debt. They saw it as a distraction. "What are you going to do, Ethan?" Clara would ask, her tone laced with that subtle condescension only an older sibling perfected. "Become a webmaster. That's not a real career. How will you even support yourself?" She'd pronounce webmaster, like it was some obscure, slightly laughable hobby. David, younger but already showing signs of marks from my previous story, dismissive tendencies, would chime in, "Yeah, Ethan, everyone knows you need a degree to get anywhere important. What company is going to hire someone without a college education?" Their words, fueled by my parents' constant reinforcement, slowly chipped away at my confidence. I'd try to explain my vision, my passion. I'd talk about successful tech entrepreneurs who dropped out of college or never went, but it was like talking to a brick wall. Their minds were already made up. The only path to success, to respectability, was through higher education. Anything else was a gamble, a pipe dream, a sign of inherent laziness or lack of intellectual rigor. The pinnacle of this family-wide intervention came the summer after my high school graduation. All my friends were buzzing about orientation, dorm rooms, and new freedoms. I was preparing to launch my first serious attempt at an online business. My parents, however, had other plans. They called a family meeting, a formal affair in the living room, with everyone seated stiffly. "Ethan," my dad began, his voice stern. We've been patient, we've listened to your ideas, but enough is enough. We've already paid the application fees to 3 excellent state universities, and you've been accepted to all of them. You will be attending state university in the fall, just like your sister did. My mom nodded, her eyes pleading. It's for your own good, sweetie. We just want you to have a secure future. We don't want you to struggle. Struggle. I felt a surge of anger. You think I'm going to struggle? I've been learning to code since I was 12. I've built a portfolio. I've got potential clients. I can build something real. Clara, ever the pragmatist, scoffed. Potential clients aren't a guarantee, Ethan. And building websites in your bedroom isn't a business. It's a hobby. You need structure. You need a foundation. College provides that. What about innovation? What about disruption? I argued, my voice rising. The world is changing. Not everyone needs a piece of paper to prove their worth anymore. My dad slammed his hand on the armrest of his chair. That's enough, don't you dare talk back to us, young man. We know what's best. We've worked hard to give you opportunities. We're not going to let you squander them on some ridiculous fantasy. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt a deep, profound sense of isolation. They didn't see me. They didn't understand me. They were so blinded by their own definition of success that they couldn't fathom an alternative. The only way forward, I realized, was to go it alone, to defy them, to prove them wrong, not with words, but with actions. The next morning, I calmly informed them that I would not be attending state university. I thanked them for their efforts, but stated, unequivocally, that my path lay elsewhere. The ensuing silence was chilling. My mother burst into tears. My father's face turned a dangerous shade of red. You are making a terrible mistake. Ethan, my dad said, his voice low and trembling with fury. A terrible, terrible mistake. Don't come crying to us when you're flipping burgers because you were too arrogant to get an education. Clara just shook her head, a look of pity mixed with disdain on her face. You'll regret this, Ethan. You're going to fall behind. You're going to be a cautionary tale. From that day forward, my status as the black sheep was cemented. Conversations with my family became strained, punctuated by sighs and veiled criticisms. How's your little business doing, Ethan? Still at it. When are you going to get a real job? Every holiday, every birthday, every family event felt like walking into a gauntlet of judgment. My parents, while not cutting me off completely, certainly didn't offer any financial support for my entrepreneurial endeavors. They paid for Clara's law school, for David's SAT prep courses, for their internships. For me, you made your bed, Ethan, my dad would say. Now lie in it. It was lonely. So incredibly lonely. Most of my high school friends were off to college, building new lives, forming new connections. I was at home, in my small, cluttered room, surrounded by monitors and server stacks, trying to teach myself everything I needed to know, from coding languages to marketing strategies. There were nights I cried into my pillow, wondering if they were right. Was I making a colossal mistake? Was I destined to fail? Was I truly just a naive kid with a pipe dream? But then, I'd look at my laptop, at the lines of code I was writing, at the potential for creation and innovation, and a stubborn resolve would harden inside me. No, this was my path. This was my passion. And I would rather fail on my own terms than succeed on theirs. The constant pressure from my family became a strange kind of fuel. Every doubt they expressed, every dismissive comment, every prediction of my inevitable downfall just intensified my desire to prove them wrong. Not just to them, but to myself. I knew what I was capable of. I just had to show them. And I knew, deep down, that when my bank account spoke for itself, they wouldn't have a leg to stand on. It was going to be a long, uphill battle, but I was ready for the fight. Leaving behind the familiar, even if it was a familiar full of judgment, felt like stepping off a cliff. My parents' words, "You made your bed, Ethan, now lie in it," echoed in my head, a constant, nagging reminder of the financial and emotional isolation I was now facing. While Clara was settling into her dorm room at State University, excitedly talking about campus life, and David was preparing for his elite high school's debate team. I was here, in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by stacks of borrowed books on programming, marketing, and business strategy. This was my new campus, my new classroom, and it was a lonely one. The first few months were brutal. You know how those motivational speakers always talk about the grind? Well, this was the grind, multiplied by 1,000. I woke up every day with a fire in my belly, a desperate need to prove them all wrong, but also a raw, terrifying fear of failure. I spent 18 hours a day teaching myself. I wasn't just learning to code. I was learning about SEO, social media marketing, sales funnels, graphic design, everything I could get my hands on. YouTube tutorials became my professors. Online forums, my classmates. Ramen noodles became my staple diet. My old high school friends, the few who hadn't immediately vanished into the college vortex, would call occasionally. "Hey, Ethan, how's, your thing going?" they'd ask, clearly unsure how to refer to my non-college, non-job existence. When I'd try to explain my vision for a digital marketing agency, their eyes would glaze over. They couldn't grasp it. It wasn't a recognized path. It wasn't a degree. And without that in their eyes and the eyes of the world I had known, it wasn't legitimate. "When are you going to get a real job, Ethan?" My mom would ask this every week, sometimes twice a week. "Your cousin Michael just started at the bank, a wonderful, stable position. He's already talking about his 401k. My dad was less frequent, but more cutting. Still playing on the computer. You know, the job market is tough. Son, there's no shame in starting over. Going to community college. We can look into it for next semester." He still saw me as a lost cause, clinging to a childish delusion. The most difficult part wasn't the lack of money or the long hours. It was the constant emotional drain from my family. Every interaction was a reminder that I was outside their circle of approval. I was the cautionary tale, the one who chose the risky path. They didn't see ambition, they saw stubbornness. They didn't see passion, they saw delusion. They certainly didn't see a future millionaire. They saw a kid wasting his potential. I remember one particularly low point. I'd spent weeks building a complex website for a potential client, pouring my heart and soul into it. They loved the design, praised my technical skills, but then, at the last minute, went with a larger, established agency. "They just seemed more professional, Ethan," the client explained apologetically. "More established. We needed someone with a proven track record, with a team." I hung up the phone, crushed. That night, I just stared at my reflection in the dark computer screen. Was I truly deluding myself? Was their skepticism justified? Was I just not smart enough, not connected enough, not legitimate enough without that college degree? The black sheep label felt like a heavy cloak, suffocating me. But then, something clicked. A memory surfaced. It wasn't about grades or degrees, but about something more fundamental. I remembered building that treehouse when I was 8. It was rickety, barely balanced, but I had designed it, built it, and climbed into it. And for that brief moment, perched amongst the leaves, I felt invincible. That was the feeling I was chasing, not their approval, but that intrinsic satisfaction of creating something from nothing. I knew I couldn't do it entirely alone. I needed guidance, not from people who would judge my path, but from those who understood it. That's when I found Marcus, not in a fancy networking event, but through an obscure online forum for indie developers. Marcus was a seasoned web developer, a gruff but brilliant guy who ran his own successful remote agency. I'd posted a technical question, feeling stupid for asking, and he'd responded with a simple, elegant solution. I bravely sent him a private message, explaining my situation, my lack of formal education, and my desperate hunger to learn. To my surprise, he replied, "Kid," he wrote, "degrees are for people who need to prove they can follow instructions. Innovation is for people who can write their own. Show me what you got." That was the beginning of my apprenticeship, informally at first, then more structured. Marcus became my true mentor. He didn't care that I hadn't gone to college. He cared about my code, my ideas, my drive. He taught me not just the technical skills, but the business acumen, how to price my services, how to negotiate, how to manage client expectations, and most importantly, how to build a sustainable business, not just a series of freelance gigs. You've got raw talent, Ethan, he'd tell me during our weekly video calls, and a work ethic that most college grads only dream of. What you lack in credentials, you make up for in grit. Don't ever let anyone tell you that you're less because you took a different road. His words were like water in a desert. They nourished my starving confidence. He became the external validation I desperately needed. But it was a healthy validation, based on merit and effort, not on familial obligation or outdated societal norms. I also met Maya around this time. She was a fellow entrepreneur, a graphic designer who had also skipped college, choosing to apprentice with a renowned artist. She understood the struggle, the self-doubt, the unique challenges of forging your own path. She became my closest friend and, eventually, my first strategic partner. Her artistic vision complemented my technical skills perfectly. Together, we could offer comprehensive digital solutions. With Marcus's mentorship and Maya's partnership, my business, which I eventually branded Innovate Digital, started to gain traction. My first real client, a local bakery, hired me to redesign their website and manage their social media. It was a small project, but when I saw their sales increase by 20% in the first month, I felt a surge of pride unlike anything a good grade ever gave me. It was tangible. It was real. It was my work. I started securing more clients, bigger projects. I moved out of my parents' house into a small, affordable apartment that also served as my office. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. The independence, both financial and emotional, was exhilarating. I was paying my own bills, making my own decisions, and building something substantial. My parents, of course, were oblivious to the true scale of my progress. When I moved out, they saw it as a temporary setback, a sign of my continued struggle. "Are you sure you can afford that, Ethan?" My mom fretted. "It's so expensive living alone. Maybe you should just come back home until you save up enough for college." "I'm fine, Mom. My business is doing well," I'd say, keeping my tone neutral. "Well, if you say so," she'd reply, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Just don't be afraid to ask for help if you need it. Your father and I, and your siblings, are always here to advise you." Advice from people who thought I was still tinkering around. It was almost comical. I learned to limit my conversations with them, to deflect their questions about my income or my work schedule. I knew that even if I told them I was making decent money, they'd just spin it into something negative. "Oh, that's good for a freelancer, I suppose, but it's not stable like a corporate job." Or, "You probably work too many hours for that kind of money. You'll burn out without a proper degree." Their goal wasn't to understand. It was to maintain their narrative that I had made the wrong choice. But the fear of failure, the fear of proving them right, slowly transformed into a powerful, almost invincible drive. Every line of code, every successful client project, every new hire at Innovate Digital. Yes, I started hiring was a small victory against their skepticism. I was building my own empire, brick by painstaking brick, and I was doing it without their blessing, their money, or their belief. This path was lonely, yes, but it was also profoundly authentic. I was living my truth, pursuing my passion, and creating value in the world. And as my bank account slowly but steadily grew, a quiet, powerful confidence began to blossom within me. The black sheep was no longer lost. He was simply on a different, more profitable, and ultimately, more fulfilling journey. And soon, very soon, those numbers were going to do all the talking for me. It's funny how success, even modest success, can sometimes make people uncomfortable, especially those who were so certain you'd fail. As Innovate Digital began to pick up speed, bringing in consistent revenue and attracting more reputable clients, the whispers from my family didn't stop. They just evolved. The outright skepticism morphed into thinly veiled dismissals, and the pity turned into a strange, almost resentful form of denial. They couldn't call my work a hobby anymore, not when I was paying my own rent in a decent part of town and not asking them for a dime. But they certainly weren't ready to call it a career either. So, Your little online thing is still going. Ethan, my Aunt Carol, my mom's sister, asked during a Christmas gathering. She was known for her pointed questions, always delivered with a saccharine smile. That's nice. You know, my daughter, Jessica, just got promoted to senior associate at her law firm. They're talking about making her partner within 5 years. That's a real career, isn't it? I just smiled. A calm, almost serene smile that I'd been perfecting. Innovate Digital is doing well. Aunt Carol, we've actually expanded our client base to include some national brands now. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. I was learning that their questions weren't about genuine interest. They were about finding a crack in my facade. A way to reaffirm their belief that college was the only path to legitimate success. My parents, while softening slightly, still couldn't bring themselves to acknowledge the reality of my achievements. When I mentioned I was hiring my 5th full-time employee, my dad just nodded. That's efficient, I suppose. But are they qualified? Do they have degrees? The subtext was always there, my success. Lacking a traditional educational foundation must inherently be less credible, less stable. Clara, the brilliant lawyer, was the most perplexing. She'd occasionally send me links to articles about tech startups failing, usually with a casual, "Thought you might find this interesting, Ethan. Just good to stay informed about the risks in your chosen field." It wasn't malicious, not exactly. It was more like she genuinely couldn't wrap her head around the idea that my path could be as valid, let alone more profitable, than her own. Her identity was so tied to her academic achievements that anyone who deviated from that path was, by definition, misguided. "You know," she said to me once, during a rare one-on-one conversation, "I just worry about you, Ethan. You're so vulnerable, no safety net, no degree to fall back on. What if it all collapses? You'd have nothing." It was a stark contrast to my reality. My safety net was my growing network, my rapidly expanding skill set, and my rapidly accumulating savings. My degree to fall back on was my ability to adapt, learn, and build. But I just listened, nodded, and changed the subject. I realized that arguing with them was futile. Their perception was their reality, and no amount of explanation would change it. This was a critical phase for me, both personally and professionally. I was no longer fighting for their approval. I was fighting against their narrative. I started setting firmer boundaries. When family conversations veered into the familiar territory of real jobs versus my thing, I would politely but definitively shut it down. "I appreciate your concern, but my business is thriving, and I'm not discussing my financials or career choices anymore." I'd state, keeping my voice calm and unwavering. It was met with varying degrees of shock and irritation. My mom would sigh dramatically. My dad would clear his throat uncomfortably. Clara would raise an eyebrow, but I held my ground. It was uncomfortable, yes, but it was essential for my mental well-being. I was protecting my peace. The more I detached emotionally from their opinions, the more my business flourished. Innovate Digital wasn't just doing websites anymore. We were building custom software solutions, developing robust e-commerce platforms, and running highly effective digital marketing campaigns for small to medium businesses across the country. Our team grew to 10 full-time employees, then 15. We moved into a legitimate office space, not a flashy one, but professional and efficient. I remember the first time I transferred a 6-figure sum into my business checking account from a client. I stared at the numbers on the screen, a surreal feeling washing over me. It wasn't just money, it was validation. It was proof that every lonely night, every self-doubt, every dismissive comment had been worth it. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. The financial independence gave me a sense of power I'd never known. It wasn't about being flashy or showing off. It was about freedom. Freedom from debt, freedom to pursue my own vision, and most importantly, freedom from the constant financial anxiety my family had tried to instill in me. They had used money as a subtle weapon, a way to control and manipulate me into their predetermined path. Now, my own money was my shield. My bond with Marcus and Maya grew stronger during this period. They were my chosen family, the ones who truly understood the entrepreneurial journey. Marcus, gruff as ever, would call me randomly just to check in. "Still kicking ass, kid?" He'd ask. "Don't let those old schoolers tell you otherwise. What you're building is real. It's the future." Maya, with her sharp wit and creative mind, became my confidant. "They're just intimidated, Ethan," she'd say over late-night work sessions. "Your success, without following their rules, challenges their entire worldview. It's easier for them to dismiss it than to admit they might have been wrong." Her insight was always spot on. It helped me process the ongoing family dynamic without letting it erode my progress. We even started collaborating on some larger projects, merging her design expertise with my development and marketing skills. Our combined synergy led to even greater success, attracting even bigger clients. The thought of my family ever understanding the complexity and scale of what we were building was almost laughable. They were still stuck on websites. As my financial situation became significantly more robust, the stark contrast between my life and the stable path my family had always championed became increasingly apparent. Clara, while successful, was constantly stressed, buried under student loan debt, and complaining about the corporate ladder. David, still in college, was already accumulating loans and seemed perpetually anxious about his post-graduation job prospects. They were following the script, but it wasn't leading them to the guaranteed happiness and security my parents had promised. Yet, despite my growing wealth and freedom, the label of black sheep persisted in their minds. It was like a filter through which they viewed me. When I bought my first significant investment property, a small commercial building that would serve as my new, larger office space and also generate rental income, my parents' reaction was muted. "Oh, that's ambitious, Ethan," my dad said, his brow furrowed. "Are you sure you know what you're doing? Property is a big commitment. You don't have a degree in finance." You know, Mark's financial advisor warned him about overextending himself. They still defaulted to referencing Mark, who was still in his corporate job, making a good salary, but certainly not in the league of property investment or business ownership that I was. It was always a subtle way to put me back in my place, to remind me that I was an amateur in comparison to their certified children. The most frustrating part was the subtle emotional manipulation. My mom would sometimes call, sounding forlorn, telling me how much they worried about me, how they just wanted me to be safe and happy. It was designed to make me feel guilty, to make me question my choices, to make me long for their approval. But I'd learned to recognize it for what it was, a desperate attempt to pull me back into their control, to make me conform to their vision of who I should be. I remember a conversation with my mom where she lamented, "It's just that Clara and David are so easy. They follow the rules. They listen. They make us proud. With you, Ethan, it's always been a struggle. Always so stubborn." It stung, of course. To be told you're a struggle, even after building a successful business, was painful. But the old me would have collapsed into self-pity. The new me recognized it as a projection of their discomfort, their inability to accept that my happiness didn't fit into their pre-approved box. So I kept building, I kept working, I kept learning, I expanded my team, took on bigger and bolder projects. I diversified my investments, quietly building a robust financial fortress. My bank account, once a source of anxiety, became a silent testament to my defiance and my hard work. It was growing steadily and impressively, a constant, undeniable counter-argument to every dismissal, every skeptical glance, every whispered doubt. The truth was, I wasn't just building a business. I was building a new identity, one entirely separate from the black sheep label my family had branded me with. I was becoming the person I was always meant to be, independent, innovative, and unapologetically successful. And I knew, deep down, that there would come a day when the sheer magnitude of my success would be undeniable. A day when my bank account would no longer whisper, but shout the truth. And on that day, the tables would turn. You know, there's a strange irony in achieving success. You expect joy, pride, vindication. And yes, those feelings were absolutely there for me. But alongside them, a new, unexpected emotion surfaced, a deep, quiet sadness. Because the more I succeeded, the more starkly obvious the unseen costs of family judgment became. It wasn't just about their dismissals anymore. It was about the profound emotional distance that had grown between us, a chasm created by years of their refusal to see me for who I truly was. My business, Innovate Digital, was flying high. We had moved from that modest office to a sprawling, modern space in a bustling tech hub downtown. We were no longer just building websites. We were developing complex enterprise software, running multi-million-dollar ad campaigns for major e-commerce brands, and even exploring AI integration. Our team had grown to nearly 50 brilliant, dedicated people. My bank account, the silent testament, was robust, overflowing, a clear indicator of just how far the black sheep had come. Yet, at family gatherings, it was like stepping into a time warp. The conversations still revolved around the same tired themes. "Oh, Ethan, still working those long hours?" my mom would ask, her eyes full of that familiar, concerned pity. "You know, Clara was saying how balanced her life is now that she's made partner. She even has time for that new yoga class she loves. It was never, 'Congratulations on your incredible growth.' Ethan attinto, or 'Tell us about your latest project.' It was always a comparison, a subtle jab, a reminder that no matter what I achieved, it wouldn't measure up to their pre-approved definition of a good life, which, of course, involved a college degree, a traditional career path, and apparently a lot of yoga. My father, in his own way, was just as adept at these subtle dismissals. He'd occasionally ask about the market or the economy, as if to imply my success was purely circumstantial, a fluke of a booming industry, rather than the result of years of relentless effort and strategic decisions. He still couldn't bring himself to acknowledge my entrepreneurial acumen. It was always, "Well, someone has to be lucky, I suppose." And Clara was still the undisputed queen of the veiled insult. She once called me, ostensibly to catch up, but quickly steered the conversation to her law firm's recent charity gala. "It was just so lovely, Ethan," she gushed. "All the senior partners were there, and so many influential clients. It's really about being part of that established network. You know, that old boys club that you just can't break into without the right credentials." The implication was clear. I, without my precious degree, would always be on the outside, looking in, despite the fact that I was building my own, far more dynamic network. "I actually prefer to build my own network, Clara," I replied, my voice steady, one based on merit and innovation, not on who went to which Ivy League school. She paused, then laughed a little too loudly. "Oh, Ethan, you're so idealistic. That's sweet. But the real world, the serious world, doesn't work like that." It was incredibly frustrating. I was literally building a company, creating jobs, generating significant wealth, and yet, in their eyes, I was still the idealistic, naive kid who didn't get it. It felt like a constant psychological battle, where I had to expend emotional energy just to deflect their negativity and protect my own sense of reality. The problem was, their judgment wasn't just external noise anymore. It had, over the years, burrowed into my subconscious. Even though I rationally knew I was successful, a small, insidious part of me still craved their validation. The child who desperately wanted to make his parents proud, who yearned for his siblings' respect, still existed, and that part of me still ached when their words, or their silences, conveyed their disappointment. One evening, after a particularly draining family dinner where David, now a rising star in finance, armed with an MBA, had lectured me about proper investment strategies, as if I hadn't already diversified my portfolio far beyond his wildest dreams, I called Marcus. He was the only one who truly understood. "They just don't get it, Marcus," I sighed, pacing my sleek modern office, which was ironically about 10 times the size of my dad's and Mark's combined. "They still see me as the kid who refused college. My entire net worth, the success of Innovate Digital, it means nothing to them. It's never enough." Marcus, ever pragmatic, listened patiently. "Ethan, they're not going to get it in the way you want them to. Their identities are too wrapped up in their own choices, their own definition of success. Your success, achieved on your own terms, challenges their entire worldview. It forces them to question if their path was the only right one. And people rarely welcome that kind of self-reflection, especially from someone they've systematically put down. So what do? I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. Just accept that I'll always be their black sheep, no matter how much money I make, no matter how much I achieve. You accept that their acceptance isn't the finish line. Marcus said simply, your happiness, your self-worth, your peace, those are the finish lines. And you build stronger boundaries. You limit exposure to their negativity. You surround yourself with people who celebrate your authentic self, not the version they want you to be. His words hit home. I had achieved financial independence, but I was still emotionally tangled in their expectations. I needed to cut that last cord. It was a painful realization, like mourning something I knew I'd never truly have. Their unconditional pride, their genuine, unadulterated respect. So I started setting even stricter boundaries. I politely declined invitations to family events that felt more like interrogation sessions. When my mom called and started her familiar refrain about worrying about me, I gently but firmly interrupt. Mom, I love you, but I'm not discussing my career or finances with you anymore. It's a boundary I need to maintain for my peace of mind. It was a shock to them, of course. There were hurt feelings, accusations of me being distant or ungrateful. But for the first time, their emotional manipulation didn't work. I felt a surge of empowerment every time I held my ground. This wasn't about being mean. It was about self-preservation. It was about protecting my energy and my mental health. I also made a conscious effort to invest more in the relationships that did nourish me. Maya became not just my business partner, but my best friend, my chosen sister. We'd spend hours brainstorming new projects, but also just laughing, sharing our dreams, and celebrating each other's victories, big and small. Her validation, born of shared struggle and mutual respect, meant infinitely more than any grudging nod from my family. I expanded my network of mentors and peers. I joined exclusive entrepreneurial groups, where my unconventional path was celebrated as innovative, not questioned as reckless. I found a new sense of belonging in these communities, a feeling of being truly seen and valued for my unique perspective and achievements. But even with all this external validation, the deep-seated yearning for familial acceptance would occasionally resurface, especially during quiet moments of reflection. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the unspoken truth that lay between us, that they had never truly believed in me, and perhaps never would. The summer of that year brought a new wave of family drama. My parents announced their 40th wedding anniversary, and they were planning a massive celebration. Not just a quiet dinner, but a lavish week-long affair at a high-end resort, complete with extended family, old friends, and what promised to be a relentless parade of our successful children. Clara called me, excited. "Ethan, it's going to be huge. Everyone's coming. Mom and Dad want you there for the whole week. It's important to them that the whole family is together." The irony wasn't lost on me. The whole family meant the one they always celebrated, the one I was constantly excluded from, emotionally speaking. I dreaded it. A whole week of veiled criticisms, comparisons, and the relentless pressure to conform. But then another thought sparked. This wasn't just their celebration. It was a gathering of everyone who had ever labeled me, dismissed me, or worried about my future. It was a stage for an undeniable truth. I thought about all the times they called me the black sheep, the countless instances where my bank account was a whispered secret, a private source of satisfaction. Now, what if that bank account could speak for itself, loudly and clearly, in a way they couldn't possibly ignore? I decided then and there, I would go to the anniversary celebration, not to seek their approval, but to finally, irrevocably, lay the ghost of the black sheep to rest. This wasn't about revenge. It was about liberation. It was about showing them, not with words or arguments, but with an undeniable, irrefutable reality, that my chosen path was not only valid, but had led me to a level of success they simply couldn't comprehend. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during a late-night work session. An unexpected problem arose with my parents' financial affairs. something complicated involving their retirement accounts and a poorly managed investment. It was a mess, something that would require significant expertise to untangle. I saw it not as a burden, but as an opportunity, a way for my bank account and the business it represented to truly speak for itself in a language they understood. The unseen divide was about to become very, very visible, and this time, it wouldn't just be me sensing it. Everyone would, there's a strange irony in achieving success. You expect joy, pride, vindication. And yes, those feelings were absolutely there for me. But alongside them, a new, unexpected emotion surfaced, a deep, quiet sadness. Because the more I succeeded, the more starkly obvious the unseen costs of family judgment became. It wasn't just about their dismissals anymore. It was about the profound emotional distance that had grown between us, a chasm created by years of their refusal to see me for who I truly was. My business, Innovate Digital, was flying high. We had moved from that modest office to a sprawling, modern space in a bustling tech hub downtown. We were no longer just building websites. We were developing complex enterprise software, running multi-million-dollar ad campaigns for major e-commerce brands, and even exploring AI integration. Our team had grown to nearly 50 brilliant, dedicated people. My bank account, the silent testament, was robust, overflowing, a clear indicator of just how far the black sheep had come. Yet, at family gatherings, it was like stepping into a time warp. The conversations still revolved around the same tired themes. "Oh, Ethan, still working those long hours?" my mom would ask, her eyes full of that familiar, concerned pity. Clara was saying how balanced her life is now that she's made partner. She even has time for that new yoga class she loves. It was never "Congratulations on your incredible growth, Ethan," or "Tell us about your latest project." It was always a comparison, a subtle jab, a reminder that no matter what I achieved, it wouldn't measure up to their pre-approved definition of a good life, which, of course, involved a college degree, a traditional career path, and apparently a lot of yoga. My father, in his own way, was just as adept at these subtle dismissals. He'd occasionally ask about the market or the economy, as if to imply my success was purely circumstantial, a fluke of a booming industry, rather than the result of years of relentless effort and strategic decisions. He still couldn't bring himself to acknowledge my entrepreneurial acumen. It was always, well, someone has to be lucky, I suppose. And Clara? Clara was still the undisputed queen of the veiled insult. She once called me, ostensibly, to catch up, but quickly steered the conversation to her law firm's recent charity gala. It was just so lovely. "Ethan," she gushed. All the senior partners were there, and so many influential clients. It's really about being part of that established network. That old boys club that you just can't break into without the right credentials. The implication was clear. I, without my precious degree, would always be on the outside looking in, despite the fact that I was building my own, far more dynamic network. "I actually prefer to build my own network, Clara," I replied, my voice steady. "One based on merit and innovation, not on who went to which Ivy League school." She paused, then laughed a little too loudly. "Oh, Ethan, you're so idealistic. That's sweet. But the real world, the serious world, doesn't work like that." It was incredibly frustrating. I was literally building a company, creating jobs, generating significant wealth, and yet, in their eyes, I was still the idealistic, naive kid who didn't get it. It felt like a constant psychological battle, where I had to expend emotional energy just to deflect their negativity and protect my own sense of reality. The problem was, their judgment wasn't just external noise anymore. It had, over the years, burrowed into my subconscious. Even though I rationally knew I was successful, a small, insidious part of me still craved their validation. The child who desperately wanted to make his parents proud, who yearned for his siblings' respect, still existed, and that part of me still ached when their words, or their silences, conveyed their disappointment. One evening, after a particularly draining family dinner where David, now a rising star in finance, armed with an MBA, had lectured me about proper investment strategies as if I hadn't already diversified my portfolio far beyond his wildest dreams. I called Marcus. He was the only one who truly understood. They just don't get it. Marcus, I sighed, pacing my sleek, modern office, which was ironically about 10 times the size of my dad's and Mark's combined. They still see me as the kid who refused college. My entire net worth, the success of Innovate Digital, it means nothing to them. It's never enough. Marcus, ever pragmatic, listened patiently. Ethan, they're not going to get it in the way you want them to. Their identities are too wrapped up in their own choices, their own definition of success. Your success, achieved on your own terms, challenges their entire worldview. It forces them to question if their path was the only right one. And people rarely welcome that kind of self-reflection, especially from someone they've systematically put down. So what do? I asked, my voice tinged with frustration. Just accept that I'll always be their black sheep. No matter how much money I make, no matter how much I achieve, you accept that their acceptance isn't the finish line, Marcus said simply. Your happiness, your self-worth, your peace, those are the finish lines. And you build stronger boundaries. You limit exposure to their negativity. You surround yourself with people who celebrate your authentic self, not the version they want you to be. His words hit home. I had achieved financial independence, but I was still emotionally tangled in their expectations. I needed to cut that last cord. It was a painful realization, like mourning something I knew I'd never truly have, their unconditional pride, their genuine, unadulterated respect. So I started setting even stricter boundaries. I politely declined invitations to family events that felt more like interrogation sessions. When my mom called and started her familiar refrain about worrying about me, I gently but firmly interrupt. Mom, I love you, but I'm not discussing my career or finances with you anymore. It's a boundary I need to maintain for my peace of mind. It was a shock to them, of course. There were hurt feelings, accusations of me being distant or ungrateful. But for the first time, their emotional manipulation didn't work. I felt a surge of empowerment every time I held my ground. This wasn't about being mean. It was about self-preservation. It was about protecting my energy and my mental health. I also made a conscious effort to invest more in the relationships that did nourish me. Maya became not just my business partner, but my best friend, my chosen sister. We'd spend hours brainstorming new projects, but also just laughing, sharing our dreams, and celebrating each other's victories, big and small. Her validation, born of shared struggle and mutual respect, meant infinitely more than any grudging nod from my family. I expanded my network of mentors and peers. I joined exclusive entrepreneurial groups, where my unconventional path was celebrated as innovative, not questioned as reckless. I found a new sense of belonging in these communities, a feeling of being truly seen and valued for my unique perspective and achievements. But even with all this external validation, the deep-seated yearning for familial acceptance would occasionally resurface, especially during quiet moments of reflection. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about the unspoken truth that lay between us, that they had never truly believed in me, and perhaps never would. The summer of that year brought a new wave of family drama. My parents announced their 40th wedding anniversary, and they were planning a massive celebration, not just a quiet dinner, but a lavish week-long affair at a high-end resort, complete with extended family, old friends, and what promised to be a relentless parade of our successful children. Clara called me, excited. Ethan, it's going to be huge. Everyone's coming. Mom and Dad want you there for the whole week. It's important to them that the whole family is together. The irony wasn't lost on me. The whole family meant the one they always celebrated, the one I was constantly excluded from, emotionally speaking. I dreaded it. A whole week of veiled criticisms, comparisons, and the relentless pressure to conform. But then, another thought sparked. This wasn't just their celebration. It was a gathering of everyone who had ever labeled me, dismissed me, or worried about my future. It was a stage for an undeniable truth. I thought about all the times they called me the black sheep, the countless instances where my bank account was a whispered secret, a private source of satisfaction. Now, what if that bank account could speak for itself, loudly and clearly, in a way they couldn't possibly ignore? I decided then and there I would go to the anniversary celebration, not to seek their approval, but to finally, irrevocably, lay the ghost of the black sheep to rest. This wasn't about revenge. It was about liberation. It was about showing them, not with words or arguments, but with an undeniable, irrefutable reality, that my chosen path was not only valid, but had led me to a level of success they simply couldn't comprehend. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during a late-night work session. An unexpected problem arose with my parents' financial affairs, something complicated involving their retirement accounts and a poorly managed investment. It was a mess, something that would require significant expertise to untangle. I saw it not as a burden, but as an opportunity. A way for my bank account and the business it represented to truly speak for itself, in a language they understood. The unseen divide was about to become very, very visible, and this time it wouldn't just be me sensing it. Everyone would. The invitation to my parents' 40th wedding anniversary felt less like a celebration and more like an impending interrogation. A week-long event at an upscale resort in the Hamptons. My stomach clenched just thinking about it. Every family gathering had always been a performance, a relentless cycle of comparison, where my path was subtly or not so subtly deemed inferior to Clara's legal brilliance and David's financial prowess. They were the golden children, the ones who had followed the right path, armed with their prestigious degrees and traditional careers. And I was still, in their eyes, the black sheep who had stubbornly refused to conform. "Are you sure you can take a whole week off Itor Issa?" Ethan, my mom had asked, her voice laced with a familiar skepticism. "Your business must keep you so busy. We just want to make sure you're not overworking yourself." The implication was clear. My work was less important, less demanding than Clara's or David's, and certainly not worth sacrificing a family obligation for. "I can manage, Mom," I'd replied, keeping my tone even. I was no longer the desperate kid craving their approval. Years of building Innovate Digital had forged a quiet strength within me, a resilience that their subtle jabs couldn't penetrate. But the raw nerve of rejection still existed, a phantom ache from all the times they'd dismissed my dreams. This anniversary wasn't just a party. It was shaping up to be the ultimate family reunion, a confluence of every relative, every family friend who had ever known me as the risky one, the unconventional one, the one they worried about. It was the perfect stage, not for a confrontation in the traditional sense, but for an undeniable unveiling. My decision to attend wasn't about seeking their validation anymore. It was about self-liberation. It was about finally, irrevocably, severing the emotional cord that tied me to their outdated expectations. And I knew exactly how I was going to do it. The unexpected problem with my parents' financial affairs had started a few months prior. It was a convoluted mess involving a complex retirement portfolio that their longtime financial advisor had, frankly, mismanaged into oblivion. Dad had called me, sounding uncharacteristically flustered. "Ethan, I know you're busy with your computer work," he'd begun, already condescending. "But your mother and I have run into a bit of a snag with our retirement funds. Our advisor, well, he's gone quiet, and we can't seem to make sense of these statements. Clara's looking into it, but it's very complex, legal jargon and all." Normally, I would have politely declined, citing my busy schedule and the fact that they never valued my financial acumen anyway. But a thought struck me. This wasn't just a snag. This was a significant crisis for them, something that could impact their carefully planned retirement, and it was a problem that my unconventional, non-degreed mind, honed by years of managing multi-million-dollar business finances, was uniquely equipped to solve. "Dad," I'd said, cutting him off before he could minimize my abilities, "send me all the documents, every single statement, every investment record, every piece of correspondence you have with this advisor. And don't let Clara touch it yet. Let me take a look." He hesitated, clearly surprised by my directness. "Are you sure, son? It's a lot. And it's not really your area. Is it? You're in digital marketing? Just send them. Dad, I'll handle it." I'd insisted, my voice firm. Over the next few weeks, I buried myself in their financial mess. It was worse than I thought. Their advisor had made reckless, high-risk investments, obscured by layers of jargon and opaque fund structures. He had leveraged their assets in ways that were highly questionable, possibly even fraudulent. Clara Brunidor, with her legal background, was still trying to untangle the contractual clauses. David, with his MBA, was still trying to make sense of the complex financial instruments. But they were both approaching it from a theoretical standpoint, trapped by their textbook knowledge. I, however, approached it like I would a complex bug in my own software. I saw patterns. I saw inefficiencies. I saw the hidden levers. My intuitive understanding of systems, refined by years of building and scaling Innovate Digital, allowed me to cut through the noise. I consulted with my own top-tier financial team, the same ones who manage my rapidly growing personal and business portfolios, and together, we meticulously unwound the entire tangled web. It took weeks of painstaking work, sleepless nights fueled by coffee and sheer determination. But I found the loopholes. I identified the hidden charges. I discovered the evidence of blatant mismanagement and potential malpractice. And I devised a plan, not just to mitigate their losses, but to recover a significant portion of their funds. It required a delicate balance of legal strategy, negotiation, and a deep understanding of financial markets. I hadn't told my parents the full extent of my findings, or my plan. I simply told them I was making progress. I wanted the unveiling to be complete, undeniable. The anniversary week in the Hamptons was a parade of past lights. The resort was lavish, the guest list extensive. Every corner I turned, there was a relative asking me, "So, Ethan, are you still doing that freelance web design you know? My niece just got a job at Google. Very stable." My cousin, Michael, the one with the stable bank job, cornered me at the welcome reception. "Ethan, good to see you. Still, self-employed. You know, the job market is pretty rough out there. My bank's always hiring for entry-level positions if you ever want to get your foot in the door." He said it with a patronizing grin, completely oblivious to the fact that my self-employment had generated more wealth in a year than his bank would see in a decade. I just smiled, that same serene, knowing smile. "Thanks, Michael, I'll keep that in mind. Innovate Digital is doing quite well, actually. We just closed our Series C funding round." The words floated in the air, barely registered by him. He simply blinked, then moved on to boast about his latest promotion. It was infuriating, yet deeply amusing. They were so blinded by their preconceived notions that they literally couldn't comprehend the words I was saying. The tension was palpable leading up to the main anniversary dinner, the climax of the week. My parents were stressed about their financial crisis, whispering about it in hushed tones, convinced they were facing ruin. Clara and David, despite their degrees, had been unable to fully grasp the complexity of the situation. Clara was still researching legal precedents. David was still running speculative risk assessments. Neither had a concrete solution. That afternoon, before the gala dinner, my dad called a private meeting with me, Mom, Clara, and David. His face was drawn, grim. "We need to talk about this financial situation. Ethan," he said, looking at me with a mixture of exasperation and grudging curiosity. "Clara and David have done their best, but it's just so complicated. We don't know what to do." Clara nodded, her usual confidence faltering. "It's a genuine mess, Dad. The advisor was incredibly deceptive. We can probably sue, but it will be a long, drawn-out battle. And there's no guarantee we'll recover everything." David chimed in. "The projections for recovery are grim. You're looking at significant losses, parents. Maybe we can try restructuring some assets, but it's not ideal." They both looked at me, a silent challenge in their eyes. They knew I'd been working on it. They expected me to offer some minor observation, some small, insignificant detail that confirmed their narrative of me as the tinkerer. I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment I had been waiting for. The moment where my bank account, my skills, and my entire unconventional journey would finally speak for themselves. "Actually," I said, my voice cutting through the despondent atmosphere, "you won't have to sue, and you won't have to worry about significant losses. Everyone looked at me, stunned. My mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "What are you talking about, Ethan?" Clara asked, her lawyerly composure cracking. "It's a serious legal battle, with complex financial instruments at play. It's not that simple." "It is if you know where to look," I replied calmly. "Your advisor, Mr. Henderson, wasn't just incompetent. He was running a quiet, sophisticated scam. He systematically drained your retirement funds into shell corporations he controlled, disguised as high-yield investments. I then proceeded to lay it all out for them, not in legal jargon or abstract financial terms, but in plain, undeniable language. I detailed every hidden fee, every fraudulent transfer, every legal loophole he had exploited. I showed them the paper trail, the digital breadcrumbs, the incontrovertible evidence I had meticulously uncovered." Clara's eyes widened with genuine shock. David looked utterly bewildered. "I've spent the last 2 months working with my own legal team and financial forensics experts," I continued. "The same ones who handle Innovate Digital's multi-million-dollar accounts. We've compiled an irrefutable case. And more importantly, we've already initiated a quiet, targeted legal action against Henderson and his co-conspirators. We moved quickly, before he could fully liquidate the assets." My dad looked at me, his mouth slightly open. You did all this without telling us." "I wanted to be sure," I said. "And I wanted to have a solution, not just a diagnosis." Then I delivered the final, undeniable blow. "As of this morning, all of your embezzled funds, plus an additional settlement for damages and emotional distress, have been recovered and transferred back into your accounts. The full amount, every single penny, and then some." The silence that followed was deafening. My mom burst into tears again, but this time, they were tears of relief, of shock, of disbelief. My dad's face, usually so composed, crumpled. He actually looked humbled. Clara, the brilliant lawyer, just stared at me, completely speechless. David, the financial wizard, looked like he'd been hit by a truck. They couldn't argue with the numbers, with the fact that I had done quickly and effectively what their combined credentials could not. This wasn't about a degree. It was about raw skill, relentless dedication, and an intuitive understanding of complex systems. It was about the tinkerer cleaning up the mess that professionals had made. And for the first time, their bank account, saved by the black sheep, truly spoke for itself. The black sheep was not only not a failure, but he was the financial savior. The silence in that Hamptons resort room after I laid out the full financial recovery plan was the loudest sound I had ever heard. My parents, Clara, David, they just stared at me, their faces a mixture of disbelief, shock, and a dawning, uncomfortable realization. It wasn't just that I had solved their problem, it was how I had done it, quickly, efficiently, and with a level of expertise that clearly dwarfed their own. Despite their prestigious degrees and years in traditional careers, my mom, bless her heart, was the first to break the spell. She rushed forward, not to hug me, but to grab my hands, her eyes wide with relief. "Ethan, is this true? All of it, our money? It's back." Tears streamed down her face, but these were tears of pure gratitude, not the worried, disappointed tears I was so accustomed to. My dad, typically so reserved, actually pulled me into a rare, awkward hug. "Son," he managed to choke out, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know what to say. We thought it was all gone. We really did." The usual stiffness in his shoulders seemed to melt away, replaced by a profound weariness that had clearly been weighing him down for months. Clara, the sharp lawyer, was still reeling. She walked over to the table where I'd laid out the meticulously organized documents and charts. Her eyes scanned the details, her brow furrowed in concentration. She picked up a printout, a complex flowchart detailing the shell corporations Henderson had used. This is brilliant. Ethan," she murmured, almost to herself. "The way you traced these funds, I didn't even consider this angle. How did you—" She looked at me, genuine awe in her eyes for the first time. Not the condescending awe of an older sister, but the respect of a peer. And David, the MBA financial whiz, just kept shaking his head. I I ran the numbers a dozen times. The projections were always negative. You found a way. How did you even know where to look? His voice was tinged with genuine curiosity, not an ounce of his usual arrogance. The usual rivalry, the need to prove his intellectual superiority, had completely evaporated in the face of undeniable results. Years of building systems, I said, a small, triumphant smile touching my lips. When you build and manage complex digital architectures, you learn to see patterns, vulnerabilities, and hidden connections. It's just like debugging a really big, really messy piece of code. And I had the best legal and financial forensics teams in the country working with me. The same ones who secure Innovate Digital's multi-million-dollar assets. That last part hit home. The mention of Innovate Digital's multi-million-dollar assets was the unspoken truth. The quiet, powerful roar of my bank account, finally speaking for itself. It wasn't just about saving their retirement. It was about the undeniable proof of my own massive, independent success. My hobby had not only flourished beyond their wildest imaginations, but it had equipped me with the skills and resources to solve problems that their real careers and traditional education couldn't touch. The rest of the anniversary week was different. The atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The veiled criticisms were gone. The condescending questions vanished. Instead, relatives approached me with genuine curiosity, asking about Innovate Digital, about my work, about how I managed to pull off such a feat for my parents. My cousin Michael, the bank guy, actually looked sheepish. "Ethan," he muttered one evening, pulling me aside, "I heard what you did for Aunt and Uncle. That's incredible. I honestly don't know how you did it. My firm would have charged them a fortune just to look at those accounts, and probably wouldn't have recovered half of it." He paused. Then, to my utter shock, extended his hand. "Seriously, congratulations. I guess I underestimated you." It wasn't a full apology, but it was genuine acknowledgement, and that, for me, was enough. I wasn't looking for apologies. I was looking for liberation from the burden of their judgment. My parents, too, seemed to have undergone a profound shift. They looked at me with a newfound respect, a quiet admiration that had never been there before. They still adored Clara and David, of course, but the dynamic was no longer one of clear hierarchy. I was no longer the black sheep. I was simply Ethan, the successful one, the capable one, the one who had saved them. "We were so worried about you, Ethan," my mom confessed one afternoon, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "We just wanted you to have a safe, secure life. We thought college was the only way. We were so wrong." She looked genuinely remorseful, her eyes filled with a regret that seemed deeply personal. My dad, always a man of few words, put a hand on my shoulder. "You proved us wrong, son. And not just about your career, about everything. Your drive, your smarts, your independence. We're proud of you, Ethan. Truly proud." Those words, "we're proud of you," resonated deep within me, finally healing a wound I hadn't realized was still so open. It wasn't the sole reason I had built my empire, but hearing them, uttered without reservation or qualification, felt like a powerful release. It wasn't about validating them, but about finally validating me in their eyes, after so many years of being dismissed. The most poignant conversation was with Clara and David. They came to my room on the last night of the anniversary, looking serious. "Ethan," Clara began, her voice unusually subdued, "we wanted to properly thank you for what you did for Mom and Dad. You saved their retirement. That was heroic." She hesitated. "And also to acknowledge that we had it wrong about you, about your path, about what it takes to succeed." David nodded. "Seriously, Ethan, I've always been so focused on traditional finance, on credentials. What you built, what you understand. It's on a completely different level. And you did it without a degree. You really redefined what success means." I looked at my siblings, the ones who had been my tormentors, my constant comparators, the golden children who had made me feel like an outcast. And for the first time, I saw not judgment, but genuine respect, and perhaps even a hint of admiration. "It's okay," I said. a wave of true peace washing over me. It was a tough road, but I wouldn't change it. It forced me to rely on myself, to truly find my own way. And honestly, your skepticism, your doubts, they fueled me. They pushed me to work harder, to prove not just you, but myself, wrong. We talked for hours that night, openly and honestly, for the first time in our lives. We talked about their stresses, their student loans, the pressures of their own careers. They talked about feeling trapped by the very paths my parents had championed. We finally saw each other, not as roles in a predetermined family drama, but as complex, flawed, and ultimately striving individuals. Life after the anniversary celebration continued, but it was irrevocably changed. My relationship with my family wasn't perfect overnight, but the fundamental dynamic had shifted. The black sheep label had been definitively shed. My parents started consulting me on financial matters, asking for business advice for their friends, boasting about Innovate Digital to anyone who would listen. They were genuinely proud, and it felt good. A warmth I hadn't known I was missing. Clara and David became allies, even occasional collaborators. Clara actually referred a new client to Innovate Digital, a legal tech startup that needed bespoke software. David, surprisingly, started asking me for investment advice for his own personal portfolio. We developed a new kind of sibling relationship, one based on mutual respect and genuine admiration, rather than competition and judgment. Innovate Digital continued its meteoric rise. We expanded internationally, launched new products, and became a recognized leader in our niche. My net worth continued to grow exponentially. The true embodiment of my early promise. The money was a symbol, yes, but the real wealth was in the freedom, the autonomy, and the profound satisfaction of having built something truly impactful from nothing, entirely on my own terms. So, if you're out there, listening to the whispers, feeling like the black sheep because your path doesn't fit someone else's mold, remember my story. Remember that true success isn't defined by a piece of paper, or a conventional career, or anyone else's approval. It's defined by your resilience, your passion, your dedication, and your unwavering belief in yourself. Let their doubts fuel you. Let their dismissals sharpen your resolve. And when the time is right, let your actions and your bank account speak for themselves. Because your worth isn't found in their validation. It's forged in your journey. Go out there and write your own story. You got this.